Sometimes the doors that close on you aren't punishments, they're directions. Directions toward a path you never knew you were meant to walk. Today, I'll tell you a story. A story about a young man named Arin, a boy who believed that rejection was the end of everything, until life showed him that rejection was only the beginning. A story about how he rose above the pain, the disappointment, the silence of unanswered hopes, and discovered his true path. A path he never expected, but one he was born for. But before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt unwanted, unchosen? Have you ever worked so hard for something only to be told you're not enough? If you have, then Arin's journey will feel like looking into a mirror, because his life began with the same question we all ask at our lowest. Why is this happening to me? And the answer slowly revealed itself through the storms he faced. Now, let's step into his world. Once upon a time, in a small town surrounded by distant hills and quiet roads, there lived a young man named Arin. The town wasn't famous, the streets weren't grand, but the mornings there had a gentle beauty. Fog resting softly on the rooftops, birds waking the sleepy houses, and the wind carrying the scent of wet soil after the night rain. On one such morning, Arin sat by the window of his small room, watching drops of water slide down the glass. The world outside looked calm, but the storm inside him had been raging for months. Arin had dreams, dreams bigger than his circumstances, dreams he worked for with everything he had. But life wasn't kind to him. He applied for scholarships. They rejected him. He applied for jobs. They said he wasn't qualified enough. He auditioned for local competitions. He never got selected. And each rejection felt like another stone placed on his chest. Sometimes he would ask himself, is there something wrong with me? Why doesn't anyone see my worth? His friends moved ahead. His cousins succeeded. Everyone had something to celebrate. Everyone except him. One evening, after yet another rejection email, he sat alone on the rooftop. The sky was dark, the wind cold, and he hugged his knees tightly, trying to hold himself together. I tried. I really tried, he whispered to himself. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Exhaustion of trying again and again, only to be pushed back every single time. But the painful part wasn't just the rejection. It was the silence afterward. No one asked how he was. No one checked on him. No one saw the battles he silently fought. In that moment, surrounded by the vast emptiness of the night sky, Arin felt completely invisible. Like he didn't matter. Like nothing he ever did would be enough. One person, however, noticed his pain. Her name was Mira, Arin's childhood friend. She found him on the rooftop, staring into the void, soaked in the cold night wind. She sat beside him quietly. No lectures, no advice, just presence. Arin, when was the last time you smiled? She asked. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat tightened, and his eyes glistened. Mira sighed gently. Rejection doesn't mean you're not good. It just means life is trying to push you somewhere else." He shook his head. "That sounds nice, Mira, but it doesn't feel true." She didn't argue. She simply placed her hand on his shoulder and said the words he never forgot. "Then let life show you." Those words hung in the air, heavy, but full of possibility. This moment was small, but it was the first spark in a journey that would change everything. Many days passed after that night on the rooftop. Arin tried to stay strong, tried to stay hopeful. But hope has a strange way of fading when life keeps repeating the same painful lesson. Every morning, he still woke up early. He still opened his laptop. He still searched for opportunities. But something inside him was slowly breaking. The spark he once carried, the spark that used to brighten his eyes, had begun to dim. One morning, the sun was barely visible through the thick clouds. The town felt unusually quiet, as if the world itself was pausing. Arin sat at his small wooden desk, staring at yet another application form. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but they didn't move. "Why bother?" he whispered. His room felt colder that day, not because of the weather, but because the warmth in his heart was fading. He pushed the laptop aside, leaned back in his chair, and let his head fall. The old ceiling fan spun slowly, making a soft, rhythmic sound that filled the silence. He stared at it blankly, feeling like his life was moving just like that fan, slowly, pointlessly, without direction. A memory flashed before his eyes. He was 12 years old, running excitedly toward his father after winning a small local art contest. His father had lifted him, hugged him tightly, and said, "Never stop trying, Arin. You're meant for something big." But now, years later, all Arin could think was he wrong? Or did I just become a disappointment? His throat tightened. Tears gathered but didn't fall. He had gotten used to holding them in. The emotional weight grew heavier one afternoon when he visited a cafe in town to clear his head. He sat by the window, the warm smell of roasted coffee filling the air. Outside, people walked with purpose, talking, laughing, moving towards something. But Arin felt like the only person standing still. A young couple near him talked excitedly about their new jobs. A man at another table shared news of his promotion over a phone call. Everywhere, life was moving. Everywhere, progress was happening. Except inside him. He wondered, why am I the only one not going anywhere? He closed his eyes, took a slow breath, and in that quiet moment, something broke inside him. A single tear fell, not out of sadness alone, but out of frustration, out of exhaustion, out of feeling unchosen by life over and over. But rejection wasn't finished with him yet. A few days later, he received an email from an organization he had dreamed of joining for years. It was his most important application, the one he believed he had a real chance at. With shaky hands, he clicked the message. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. "We regret to inform you." His heart dropped. His breath disappeared for a moment. The room suddenly felt suffocating. He stood up, walked back, and sank onto his bed, staring at the floor. "I gave everything to this. Why was it still not enough? For the first time in months, he didn't try to stop his tears. They fell freely, dripping onto his hands, onto the bedsheet, onto the dreams he had held so tightly. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the feeling that life kept saying no to him, louder each time. He buried his face in his palms and whispered, "Maybe this world isn't for people like me." But life has a strange way of speaking when you least expect it. And what happened next became the beginning of the shift. A small moment, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to change the direction of his entire life. And that turning moment arrived the very next morning. The next morning arrived gently. The clouds were thinner, and soft sunlight peeked through them like golden threads, stitching the sky back together. But inside Arin's room, everything still felt heavy, like grief hanging in the air. He woke up late, his eyes swollen, breath uneven, mind exhausted. The rejection email from the night before was still open on his laptop. The words sharp, cold, and unforgiving. He closed it slowly, almost fearfully, as if shutting it would make the pain disappear. But then, something unexpected happened. He heard footsteps outside his door, light, hesitant, familiar. A few seconds later, a gentle knock. Talk, talk, talk. He knew that knock. It belonged to Mira. "Arin?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Are you awake?" He didn't answer. Part of him didn't want anyone to see him like this, fragile, defeated, broken. But Mira opened the door anyway, slowly, carefully, as if entering a room where someone was Rico. And in a way, he was. She stepped inside, holding something in her hand, a small folded piece of paper. Her eyes scanned the room, the unmade bed, the untouched breakfast tray, the closed curtains that kept the world out. She understood everything without a single word. "You saw the email, didn't you?" Arin looked away. His throat closed up. He couldn't speak. Mira placed the paper on his desk gently. "I thought you'd want to see this," she said, stepping back. He frowned slightly, confused. "What is it?" She hesitated, then smiled a small, sad smile. "It's something you wrote when you were 16. Arin slowly picked up the paper. The edges were soft with age, slightly yellowed. His name was written in the corner, in his own messy teenage handwriting. He unfolded it carefully, and as soon as he saw the words, his breath hitched. It was a note he had written to himself years ago, a school assignment titled, "My Future Self." The first line read, "No matter what happens, Arin, don't lose your fire." His eyes softened. His hands trembled slightly. Memories flooded in of a younger version of himself, full of dreams, courage, and belief. The next lines hit him even harder. "One day you will feel like giving up. When that day comes, remember that every no is teaching you where to go." He closed his eyes. His chest tightened, not with pain, but with a strange sense of awakening, as if the younger Arin had reached across time to pull him back to his feet. Mira sat beside him. "You wrote that for moments like today," she whispered. "You've forgotten who you were, so I wanted you to meet him again." He swallowed hard, his voice shaky. I don't know what to do anymore, Mira. She looked at him, not with sympathy, but with genuine belief. You don't have to know, she said. You just have to keep moving, keep trying, because your path isn't behind you, it's ahead. Her words hit him with the quiet force of truth. Arin stared at the old paper again, and for the first time in months, something inside him flickered. A tiny, fragile spark. Hope. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. And that was enough. That morning, Arin did something small, but powerful. He stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains open. Sunlight spilled into the room, touching the floor, warming his face, filling the space that had been cold for so long. The world outside hadn't changed, but something inside him had begun to shift. He took a slow breath, placed the old letter on his desk, and whispered, maybe it's time to start again. The next few days felt different for Arin. Not dramatically different, just slightly lighter. He wasn't suddenly confident. He wasn't suddenly inspired. He wasn't suddenly fixed. No, his wounds were still there. His doubts were still loud. His fears still whispered in the back of his mind. But he was moving, one small step at a time. And in life, small steps often matter more than giant leaps. Early one morning, he walked to the nearby park, a place he used to visit as a child. The air was cool, touched by the soft breath of dawn. Birds fluttered between branches, and faint sunlight painted the sky in pastel colors. Arin sat on an old wooden bench, watching the world wake up slowly. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: stillness. For months, he had been drowning in noise, the noise of expectations, failures, comparisons. But in that moment, the silence around him felt healing. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The air filled his lungs, and with each breath, a bit of heaviness lifted. Just a bit, but enough. Later that day, he opened his laptop again. This time, he didn't apply for jobs. He didn't search for opportunities that had rejected him before. Instead, he wrote. At first, it was just small, messy thoughts. How he felt, what he feared, what he wanted, what confused him. Then, those thoughts turned into paragraphs. Those paragraphs turned into reflections. And those reflections turned into something unexpected. Clarity. He realized something he had never admitted aloud. He had been chasing paths that others expected from him, not what he truly wanted. He had never asked himself the most important question: what do I really want to become? That single question lingered in the air like an echo. Over the next week, Arin began exploring things he had always been curious about, but never had the courage to try. He attended a small workshop in town. Not something big, just a community class on communication and storytelling. The room smelled of whiteboard markers and dust. People chatted quietly. The walls were covered with motivational quotes he normally ignored. Arin sat in the last row, nervous but hopeful. The instructor, an older man with a warm smile, began the session by asking, "Why are you here?" Arin didn't know how to answer. He didn't even know what to say, but he lifted his hand slowly. When the instructor pointed at him, Arin swallowed and said, "I'm trying to learn who I am again." The room grew quiet. Everyone looked at him, not with judgment, but with understanding. The instructor nodded. "Then you're exactly where you need to be." Those words gave Arin a small burst of confidence, tiny but real. He attended the workshop again the next day, and the next, and the next. He started speaking a little more, sharing a little more, opening up a little more. His voice still shook sometimes, his palms still got sweaty, his heart still raced, but he kept going. And slowly, he began feeling something he hadn't felt in years: capability. But transformation isn't a straight line, and life always tests you just when you start feeling hopeful. One afternoon, after presenting a small assignment in front of the group, Arin overheard two participants whispering behind him. "I don't think he's very good," one said. "He's too nervous," the other added. Their words were sharp, cold, cutting. He froze. His heartbeat grew loud. His throat tightened. For a moment, he felt himself slipping back into old pain, the familiar sting of rejection. He stepped outside the building, the door clicking shut behind him. The sun was bright, but inside, he felt the same darkness he had been trying to escape. "Maybe they're right," he whispered. "Maybe I really can't do this." A deep sigh escaped him. His eyes stung. But then, he remembered the paper from his childhood. The one where he wrote, "One day, you will feel like giving up. When that day comes, remember that every no is teaching you where to go." He took a slow breath, wiped his eyes, and whispered, "Not this time." It was quiet, it was small, but it was powerful, because this time, rejection didn't break him, it shaped him. Arin walked home from the workshop with slow, steady steps. The sun had begun its descent, painting the city in warm shades of orange and gold. People passed him by, talking, laughing, living their lives, and for once, he didn't feel left behind. He felt aware, more connected, more present, but something deeper was stirring inside him, like a quiet voice he had ignored for years, finally whispering loud enough to be heard. That night, after showering and eating a simple meal, he sat at his desk again. The soft hum of the lamp filled the silence. His notebook lay open in front of him, the pages slightly curled from use. He picked up his pen, not because he had to, not because someone asked him to, not because he needed to prove anything, but because for the first time in a long time, he wanted to. He began writing about the workshop, the people he met, but then something unexpected happened. His writing shifted. He wasn't just documenting his experiences anymore. He was telling a story. Images formed in his mind, scenes, emotions, characters, rhythms. Words flowed through him like water from a place he didn't know existed. There was ease. There was passion. There was fire. He wrote for an hour, then 2, then 3. When he finally stopped, exhausted but exhilarated, he stared at the pages. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It wasn't even complete, but it was alive. And somewhere deep inside, a realization bloomed. I love this. Writing had always been there, quietly waiting, patiently sitting behind all the noise, the responsibilities, the expectations. A forgotten part of him had finally spoken. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. He felt a strange excitement, subtle but undeniable. He made tea, sat by the window, and opened his notebook again. The pen felt familiar in his hand, like something he was always meant to hold. He wrote again, and again, and again. Not for praise, not for recognition, not for external validation. He wrote because it made him feel whole. Every sentence was a step toward himself. Every paragraph was a breath he hadn't taken in years. Every page was a small piece of healing. A week passed, and Arin continued attending the workshop. He noticed something new. He was starting to observe people more deeply, their emotions, their stories, their strengths and vulnerabilities. And every time he noticed something meaningful, he would take out his notebook and jot it down. One evening, the instructor approached him after class. "You write a lot," he said, smiling. "There's something thoughtful about the way you observe things." Arin felt his face warm slightly. "No one's ever said that to me before." The instructor nodded. People who feel deeply often see deeply, and people who see deeply usually have a story they're meant to share. Arin's chest tightened, not from fear, but from resonance, as if someone had verbalized the thing he hadn't been brave enough to admit. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling like constellations in motion. What if writing wasn't just a hobby? What if it was more than just a way to cope? What if this was the thing he was meant to follow? He turned onto his side. His heart beat with a soft, steady rhythm. Then the question formed, gentle but life-changing. Is this my path? It wasn't an answer, but it was the right question. And asking the right question is often the first step toward destiny. The morning after that restless night, Arin sat at his small kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from his cup of tea. The room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that forces you to face the truth you've been avoiding. He felt it in his chest, that subtle pull toward writing, that quiet fire that had been lit inside him. But almost instantly, the fear rose with it. What if it's not practical? What if I'm not good enough? What if people laugh? What if I'm wasting my time? It was a battle, one he wasn't sure he was ready to fight. That week, every time he returned from work, he'd sit at his desk and write. Yet every time, doubt followed him like a shadow. He wrote with passion and doubted with intensity. He loved the craft, yet questioned whether he had the right to pursue it. Hope and fear lived side by side inside him. Two roommates stuck in the same tiny apartment. And each night, he wondered. One evening, as he was packing up after the workshop, the instructor approached him again. "You seem quieter this week," he said gently. Arin hesitated. "I guess I'm confused." The instructor nodded, as if he understood without explanation. "Finding something you care about is the easy part," he said. "Choosing it, that's the hard part." Arin looked down. "I don't know if I'm brave enough." The instructor placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't choose a path because you're fearless. You choose it because it brings you alive. Fear is just the noise around your purpose." The words sank into him slowly, like warm sunlight touching cold skin. That night, Arin walked home under a sky littered with stars. The air was cool, the streets quiet, and each step echoed softly. He remembered something from his childhood, a small moment he hadn't thought about in years. He was 8. His teacher had asked the class to write a short story about a magical place. Arin had stayed up late, filling the pages with mountains and oceans and glowing creatures. The next day, the teacher read his story out loud. The whole class listened, and for the first time, Arin felt seen, not for being loud or successful, but for the world he had created. He had forgotten that memory, because life, responsibilities, judgment, expectations, they all bury the parts of us that shine the most. But now, that small childhood light flickered again. Over the next few weeks, something profound began to happen. Writing was no longer just something he did at night. It followed him everywhere. During lunch breaks, on the bus, in the park, at the cafe, even in the workshop, during quiet moments. His notebook filled page after page with emotions, observations, stories, ideas, tiny seeds of something larger. But the more he wrote, the more he felt torn. He was afraid of failing, but he was also afraid of not trying. What if this was the thing he'd spent his whole life searching for? What if rejecting it now would become the biggest regret of his future self? The fear of regret grew louder than the fear of failure. Then came the moment, the one that pushed him over the edge. One Saturday morning, he met an old school friend at a local cafe. They talked about life, work, goals. When Arin mentioned he'd been writing lately, his friend chuckled lightly. "You? Writing? Since when?" Not with cruelty, but with that casual disbelief people have when they can't see your dreams. Arin forced a smile, but something inside him cracked. Walking home, he felt the old sting of rejection. Not the dramatic, heartbreaking kind, but the quiet type that whispers, "Maybe they're right." He reached his apartment, sat at his desk, and opened his notebook. He stared at the blank page, not writing, just breathing. Then he wrote one sentence: "I won't let someone else define my path again." And it was in that moment, small, quiet, uncelebrated, that Arin made a choice. Not dramatic, not grand, but strong. He would follow writing, not because he believed he was great, not because he knew it would lead somewhere, not because the world expected it, but because something deep inside him finally felt aligned. For the first time in a long time, Arin felt right. Arin had finally chosen his path, quietly, privately, and without applause. But life has a way of testing every decision we make, and this test would shake him more deeply than he ever expected. A month after committing to writing, Arin noticed something unusual. He wasn't just writing more, he was writing better. Little moments from his daily life turned into scenes. Conversations turned into lessons. Strangers on the bus became characters. Sunset walks became metaphors. His notebook was no longer just paper. It was a mirror, reflecting who he was becoming. One evening after a workshop, the instructor read one of Arin's pieces out loud. The room fell completely silent. Not because it was perfect, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. When the reading ended, someone whispered, "Who wrote that?" And when they learned it was Arin, the quiet guy who sat in the back, several people turned to look at him with new eyes. Not disbelief, not rejection, just recognition. For the first time ever, Arin felt accepted. He walked home that night under warm yellow streetlights, smiling softly to himself. It wasn't success, but it was direction. But when purpose grows, resistance grows too. Within weeks, everything in Arin's life became heavier. His job started demanding more hours. His parents pressured him to focus on something secure. Bills piled up. Sleep became a luxury. The world around him didn't care about his dream. Some mornings he woke up with his heart racing, already exhausted before the day even began. There were nights he stared at his notebook, but the words wouldn't come. Fear returned. Not the same fear that once held him back, but a new one. What if I can't balance this? What if I'm not strong enough? What if choosing this path destroys everything? The doubt made his hands shake as he wrote. His once steady confidence now cracked under pressure. He felt like he was drowning, caught between survival and purpose. Then came the moment that nearly shattered him. One evening, he submitted a story to a small online writing contest. Nothing big, nothing life-changing, but it mattered to him. He spent days crafting it, making sure every sentence carried emotion. Hope curled inside him, just a little. 2 weeks later, he opened the results email. Rejected, not shortlisted, not acknowledged, not even a basic compliment. Just a short, cold message. Thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, it was not selected. That was it. He closed his laptop slowly. His eyes stung. His chest tightened. He felt the familiar old ache. The same feeling he had the day he wasn't selected in the drama audition. The same feeling he had every time someone doubted him. Rejection. That heavy, suffocating word. He sat alone in the dark for hours. Not crying, just empty. A single question echoed inside him. What if I'm fooling myself again? At 1 a.m., unable to sleep, Arin stepped outside. The night was cold, and the wind brushed against his face like chilled water. The streets were silent. Street lamps flickered softly. A dog barked in the distance. He walked to a small park nearby and sat on a bench. His breath fogged the air. His fingers were freezing, but he didn't move. He stared up at the sky, at the moon that seemed smaller than usual, and the stars that looked tired, just like him. He whispered to himself, voice trembling. Why does it hurt so much to be rejected? Then, another voice came from within. Calm, quiet, almost like an answer. Because you care, and caring means you're alive. He closed his eyes. Tears gathered, not from sadness, but from something deeper. Because in that moment, Arin realized something he had ignored for years. He wasn't hurting because he failed. He was hurting because he finally loved something, enough to try. And that pain, as he sat in the cold silence, a memory surfaced, unexpected and vivid. His school drama teacher, standing in front of him years ago, looking disappointed, telling him he didn't have enough presence for the stage. At the time, it destroyed him. But tonight, he saw something different. He saw a boy who wasn't ready then, and a man who was ready now. He whispered in the quiet night, as if speaking to his younger self, "You're not the boy who gave up anymore. You're the man who tries." He felt something shift inside his chest. A release, a letting go, a quiet awakening. He wiped his face, took a deep breath, and looked up at the sky with steadier eyes. "No more running," he whispered. "No more letting rejection define me." He stood slowly, hands cold, heart warm. Something had changed, quietly, but powerfully. Arin walked back to his apartment that night, feeling lighter, as if he had left a version of himself behind on that cold park bench. The version that needed approval, validation, applause. Now, he didn't write to be chosen. He wrote because it was who he was. And something magical happens in life when your actions finally align with your truth. The next morning, Arin woke up before sunrise. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He brewed a simple cup of tea, sat by the window, and opened his notebook. For a moment, he listened to the faint hum of the city waking up. The words flowed differently now, not as a desperate attempt to prove something, but as an honest expression of what lived inside him. Every sentence carried weight. Every paragraph carried intention. This wasn't a hobby anymore. It was a calling. Confidence doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, through repeated action that slowly dissolves fear. Arin began reading books on writing, watching interviews of storytellers, practicing dialogue, imagery, rhythm. He filled notebooks faster than he ever had before. At cafes, he scribbled ideas. On bus rides, he observed people and wrote descriptions. During breaks at work, he outlined chapters. He wasn't perfect, but he was consistent. And consistency creates transformation. Slowly, his voice changed. His sentences became cleaner. His emotions became clearer. His stories began touching people. At the workshop, others noticed. One woman said, "Your writing feels honest." Another said, "I felt that scene. I could see it." Someone else whispered, "Keep going. You have something." For the first time in years, Arin didn't shrink from compliments. He didn't dismiss praise. He simply nodded, smiled softly, and said, "Thank you," because he finally believed it too. Months passed. Arin grew quietly and steadily. Then one evening, the writing instructor made an announcement. We're hosting an open reading night. Anyone who wants to share their work in front of an audience is welcome. Arin froze. A reading, a stage, an audience. It felt like fate was calling him back to the very place where his confidence had once shattered. A chance to rewrite an old wound. A chance to rise where he once fell. His heart pounded. His palms sweat. His breath trembled. But something inside whispered, "This is your moment." So he signed up. The evening of the event, Arin wore a simple white shirt, holding a folded page of his writing in his hand. The venue was small. Soft lights, wooden chairs, a warm atmosphere filled with the scent of coffee. The audience chatted quietly. The microphone stood in the center, waiting. Arin sat in the third row, trying to steady his breathing. His heart beat fast, like a drum echoing in his chest. Names were called. People went up, read their pieces, received gentle applause. Then the host called. Next, Arin. He stood. His legs felt heavy. His throat tightened. Walking to the stage felt like walking through water. He reached the mic. His hands trembled slightly. He unfolded the paper. For a moment, just a moment, he felt that old fear rise. The fear from years ago. The fear that had made him walk away from the drama club stage. But then he remembered the cold night in the park, the quiet awakening, the decision he made. And he whispered to himself, so softly, only he could hear, "Not this time." He took a deep breath and began reading. His voice wasn't perfect. It wavered at first. His hands shook. But his words were steady. He read a piece about rejection, about being lost, about finding purpose in unexpected places. The room went silent. People listened with stillness, as if they could feel every emotion woven into his sentences. As he reached the final line, his voice softened, and when he finished, the entire room erupted into warm applause. Not loud, not forced, not pity, just genuine. The kind that wraps around your soul and tells you you're finally where you're meant to be. Arin looked up, eyes glistening, heart full. For the first time in his life, he felt home on a stage. He stepped down from the platform not as the quiet boy who once ran from rejection, but as the man who faced it and transformed because of it. The applause faded. The evening ended. People went home. But Arin walked out of the venue with something priceless. A new identity. He was no longer the rejected one. No longer the confused one. No longer the one who almost chose a path but stepped back. He was Arin, the writer. Arin, the storyteller. Arin, the man who rose above rejection and found his path. And the world felt different because he was different. Life didn't magically transform for Arin overnight. There were still bills to pay, still responsibilities, still challenges and doubts. But something essential had changed. The boy who once feared rejection had become a man who used it as fuel. And when that shift happens inside you, the entire direction of your life changes. Months passed, then a year. Arin continued writing. Every morning before sunrise, every evening after work. Not for perfection, not for praise, but for meaning. Soon, he gathered enough pieces to create a small collection of essays and short stories. He shared them at local events, then with online communities, then eventually with a small but growing audience of readers who felt touched by his honesty. People wrote messages like, "Your story made me feel less alone. Thank you for putting my feelings into words. I was stuck, but your writing gave me clarity." These messages surprised him, moved him, humbled him. He realized something profound. When you speak from a place of truth, you touch places inside others that they didn't know how to express. Rejection had once silenced him. Now it had become the very reason he spoke. One evening, his old writing instructor invited him to speak at a workshop. Not as a student, but as someone others could learn from. Standing at the front of the room, facing a dozen hopeful storytellers, Arin felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He remembered the first time he sat in that very same room. Quiet, unsure, doubtful, afraid. And now, here he was, a living example that purpose doesn't emerge from success. It emerges from perseverance. He shared his journey. He spoke of the audition that once broke him, the small workshop class, the contest rejection, the sleepless nights, the decision on the park bench, the night of the reading, the slow, steady rise that followed. And at the end, he said something that silenced the entire room. Don't fear being rejected by others. Fear rejecting yourself. The room fell still. Several people nodded. A few even teared up because they understood. After the workshop, Arin walked through the quiet streets alone. The night breeze brushed against him gently. Streetlights glowed softly. His footsteps echoed rhythmically on the pavement. But this walk felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, not aimless. It felt peaceful. He passed the cafe where his friend once doubted him. He passed the park bench where he once found clarity. He passed the old community hall where he first attended a writing workshop. Every place that once held pain now held meaning. Every moment that once felt like a wound now felt like a chapter. He realized something most people never see clearly. Rejection is not a wall, it's a direction. He looked up at the sky, a gentle smile forming. "I'm grateful," he whispered. Not for the rejection itself, but for what it taught him. Because rejection didn't end his path, it revealed it. And now, the message Arin learned, the message he lived, the message he would want you to hear. Your purpose is not hiding from you. It is waiting for you to grow strong enough to choose it. You will face rejection. You will face doubt. You will lose your way. You will question everything. But the truth is simple. Rejection is not proof that you're not enough. It's proof that you're being redirected towards something meant for you. Arin found his true path, not by succeeding, but by rising every time life said no. And so can you. Take the first step, then the next, and the next. Even if you tremble, even if you doubt, even if the world doesn't understand. Because one day, you'll look back and realize you didn't rise above rejection.